One of the things you can always count on to happen when there's a successful Indian space mission like the one yesterday is a total meltdown in a tiny but very vocal section of the United Kingdom. A motley bunch of British far-right politicians, journalists and commentators who you'll see immediately triggered while India is celebrating its success in space. It's happened many times before, and it definitely happened when the Chandrayaan 3 was launched last month. And boy, did it happen yesterday when the Vikram touched down on the moon. The contents of the tweets you see on the screen that are part of this meltdown are all largely the same. They question why the United Kingdom is continuing to provide aid to India when India is killing it in space and clearly doesn't need handouts from any other country. Many, including me, have reacted to some of these tweets with sarcasm and anger, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But first, the facts about UK aid to India. It's true, the UK does provide millions of pounds to India. I don't know whether to call it aid or not, and you'll see why in a moment. The last recorded figure was $2.3 billion between 2016 and 2021. That's confirmed. But is this really aid? Is this really a handout? Is this really charity? Is this the generosity of the United Kingdom? Or are these funds specifically to further Britain's own interests? Let me quote from the March 2023 report of the UK's Independent Commission for Aid Impact, which reports to British Parliament on the issue of aid provided by that country. The report says that this £2.3 billion to India supports a range of UK-India roadmap objectives under the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, serving as a tool for UK foreign policy, diplomatic and trade objectives. In other words, this $2.3 billion is money being spent by the UK to further their national interests. British aid to India was to have wound down by around 2015, but hasn't for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons is that the aid simply isn't aid anymore, but money of a very different nature and purpose. Let me explain. In other words, according to this report that we have in our hands, the UK no longer provides traditional aid to India as we know it, but provides loans and equity investments to the Indian private sector that bring a financial return to the UK. In other words, not aid, but investment. But hold on, it gets better. Of the £2.3 billion paid by the UK, in terms of aid, as they call it, between 2016 and 2021, £129 million was from the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, or FCDO, which, as per this report in the UK, generates returns, in principle, saving British taxpayer money. This organization, the FCDO, has been quoted in the media as saying that since 2015, the UK has given no financial aid to the government of India, and that most of its funding is focused on business investments which help create new markets and jobs for the United Kingdom as well as India. Again, of the £2.3 billion of aid between 2016 and 2021, £1 billion of this is investments by an organization called British International Investment, or BII. This report confirms that this portfolio of investments in India has been generating returns directly for the UK taxpayer. All of the other so-called aid is in financial institutions and research projects and NGOs. None of it is charity or aid. All of it directly benefits the United Kingdom's interests. The UK is profiting, in other words, from the money it puts into India and it calls aid. But of course, monetary profit isn't the only compelling factor for aid of this kind. Because post-2016, the UK found itself floundering post-Brexit and needed to independently rebuild and sustain its engagement in India. The reason for this meltdown, which I have to admit is in a very tiny section of Britain, is therefore mindless, to say the least. India doesn't need this aid, and in fact has since 2012 communicated quite clearly that this British aid makes no difference to India's ambitions and interests. That alone is proof that this aid is being pushed by the UK to further the UK's own diplomatic and trade interess. A recognition that it cannot afford to weaken its ties in India and must have investments in one of the world's fastest growing economies. Not aid, investment, especially at a time when the UK is headed into a recession, record inflation and financial stress. As a final point, and this is more emotion really, it's a little rich to see a bunch of privileged white men talk about aid to India while continuing to live a life that's still in some way or other afforded by the centuries of plunder Britain subjected India to. Is there an estimate for how much the UK owes India for everything it took from here? Just something to think about. Thanks for listening.